November 1910. Six men board a private railway car in New Jersey under cover of darkness. They use only first names, no business cards, no identifying documents. They arrive separately so they are not seen together. Their combined personal wealth represents approximately 1/4 of the entire wealth of the United States of America. They are traveling to a private island off the coast of Georgia. And what they decide over the next 9 days will shape the American economy for the next 100 years. The meeting was so secret that it wasn't publicly acknowledged for more than 2 decades. When it finally was, one of the attendees called it the most important meeting in the history of American finance. He wasn't wrong. This is the story of Jekyll Island and the birth of the Federal Reserve. Now, before we go any further, we need to say something that most channels won't. There is genuine disagreement among historians about what happened on that island and what it means. We're going to show you both sides and let you decide. To understand why the Federal Reserve was created, you need to understand the panic of 1907. In October of that year, a failed attempt to corner the copper market triggered a cascade of bank failures across New York. Depositors ran to their banks in panic. Banks ran out of cash. The entire American financial system teetered on the edge of collapse. And then, one man stepped in and stopped it. J.P. Morgan, the most powerful private banker in America. He locked the most influential financiers in New York inside his personal library and refused to let them leave until they agreed to pool their resources and stabilize the system. It worked. But it left Washington deeply uncomfortable. One private citizen, unelected, unaccountable, answerable to no one, had just single-handedly decided the fate of the American economy. Congress began calling for reform, and the bankers, sensing that reform was coming whether they wanted it or not, decided they would rather write it themselves. This is where historians begin to disagree. Here is what virtually every historian, mainstream or otherwise, agrees on. In November 1910, 6 men met in secret at the Jekyll Island Club on the coast of Georgia. Senator Nelson Aldrich, the most powerful senator in America and father-in-law of John D. Rockefeller Jr. Arthur Shelton, Aldrich's private secretary. The man responsible for making sure nothing was written, recorded, or leaked. Abraham Piatt Andrew, Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, the government's representative in the room. Henry Davison, Senior Partner at J.P. Morgan. Frank Vanderlip, President of the National City Bank of New York, representing the Rockefeller banking interests. And Paul Warburg, a partner at Kuhn Loeb and Company, a German-born banker widely credited by modern scholars as the intellectual architect of the entire plan. 6 men. 3 of the most powerful banking dynasties in America. 1 senator, 1 treasury official, 1 secretary sworn to silence. They used only first names on the journey down: Nelson, Harry, Frank, Paul, Piatt, and Arthur, so that train staff could not identify them. They called themselves the First Name Club, and for over 20 years, they denied the meeting had ever happened. Now here is where the story gets complicated. In 1994, a writer named G. Edward Griffin published a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It became a bestseller. It has influenced millions of readers, including U.S. Congressman Ron Paul. Griffin's argument is this: the men on Jekyll Island were not reformers trying to fix a broken banking system. They were cartel members designing a private institution that would appear to be a government body, while secretly serving the interests of the banks that created it. He argues the Federal Reserve is not federal, has no reserves, and was designed from day one to transfer wealth from ordinary Americans to the banking elite. Some of that argument, the parts about the secrecy, the conflicts of interest, the revolving door between the banks and the institution they created, is supported by the historical record. But mainstream historians push back hard on the broader claims. Peter Conti Brown of the Wharton School says Griffin hits his target on the existence and significance of the Jekyll Island meeting, but argues that the Federal Reserve that was actually built bears little relationship, from a governance standpoint, to the sinister cartel Griffin describes. Academic economist Edward Flaherty characterized Griffin's description of the meeting as amateurish and highly suspect. And journalist Jesse Walker says Griffin's book has grains of truth, but reduces everything to a narrative where the mustache twirlers are behind everything. So where does that leave us? With the facts, which are damning enough on their own. Over 9 days on Jekyll Island, the 6 men drafted what would eventually become the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Here is what is not in dispute. The men who wrote the legislation that would regulate American banking were the bankers themselves. Senator Aldrich later said, on the congressional record, that if Congress had known who had actually written the banking bill, it would never have passed. So they disguised it. They stripped Aldrich's name from the bill, reframed it as a Democratic initiative, and pushed it through Congress on December 23, 1913, 2 days before Christmas, when many members had already left Washington. Woodrow Wilson signed it that night. Whether you believe Griffin's version, that this was a deliberate conspiracy to enslave America to a banking cartel, or the mainstream version, that it was a necessary reform pushed through by men with obvious conflicts of interest, one thing is undeniable. The people who most benefited from the Federal Reserve were the people who built it. For more than 20 years, the Jekyll Island meeting was a secret. Every participant denied it had ever happened. In 1916, B.C. Forbes, the founder of Forbes magazine, first reported on the meeting in print. He was dismissed. The story was called a fantasy. It wasn't until 1930, 17 years after the Federal Reserve had been running the American economy, that the participants finally admitted the meeting had taken place. By then, it didn't matter. The system was entrenched. The institution was established. The architecture was set. And here is the detail that every historian, Griffin and his critics alike, agrees is significant. Aldrich himself admitted the secrecy was deliberate. He said, on the record, that if the public had known who was in that room writing that bill, the bill would never have become law. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a confession. The Federal Reserve today controls the price of money in the United States. Every interest rate decision made in that building on Constitution Avenue affects the price of your mortgage, your car payment, your credit card, your savings account. Those decisions are made by a board that is appointed through a process heavily influenced by the banking industry it is supposed to regulate. The 12 Federal Reserve banks are technically private corporations. Their shareholders are member banks. Those member banks collect dividends. Whether that makes the Fed a government institution serving the public or a private banking cartel dressed in the language of public service depends on who you ask. Mainstream economists will tell you the Fed is imperfect but necessary, that without it the financial panics of the 19th century would still be destroying the economy every decade. Critics like Griffin will tell you those panics are exactly what the Fed was designed to manufacture, so that banks could profit from the rescue. We present both sides. We report what the documents say. We let you decide. But here is what nobody disputes. The 6 men who met on Jekyll Island in 1910 were not elected, were not accountable to the public, and designed a system that they then denied having designed. For 20 years, Jekyll Island still exists. The Jekyll Island Club, where the Federal Reserve was born, is still standing. Today it operates as a luxury hotel and resort. You can book a room and sleep in the same building where 6 men quietly rewrote the rules of American money. They'll even give you a tour. Whether you leave that tour believing the Federal Reserve is a necessary institution that stabilized a chaotic economy, or a century-old banking cartel that has been picking your pocket ever since, is a question only you can answer. But you should ask it. Because for 110 years, most people haven't. The vault gets richer. And somewhere, always somewhere, something else is burning. Next video. The man who tried to destroy the central bank before the Federal Reserve existed, and what it cost him. Andrew Jackson, Nicholas Biddle, and the Bank War of 1832. Subscribe to Vault and Ruin. We go where the money went.